So, time to take stock of the kind of key influences that we've had over the last, let's just say, 25 to 30 years. Well, you know this, right? You don't need me to say much about this. Everybody knows Cummins, and it's been very influential, and it's been adopted for the first time, publicly acknowledged in around about 2005 in the DFES documents that, this is a business. Pigs and cow, okay? So if I were now to wear my, as it were, academic hat, I would ask the question, well, what kind of perspective is this in terms of language? Well, it is a psychocognitive perspective, okay? Because Jim Cummins himself would be the first to tell you, he was trained as an educational psychologist, not a linguist, not a language teacher, okay? Insofar as he talks about language at all, and he does, but he talks in terms of vocabulary and sentence grammar, not text level. And the pigs and cow distinction, for example, is not content specific. So it goes across everywhere, every minute, every second of the curriculum time. So to the extent that if you like contextualize, context-embedded language is easier to understand and by extension to learn, then you provide lots and lots of context, and so learning would become easier. And it takes a long time to get to the, as it were, the CALC, the academic literacy, if you like, academic English side of things. And because that's primarily context reduced, and it's complex grammar, complex long words with Latin or Greek roots, and so on and so on. But of course, very helpful stuff, no question about it. As I would be the first to admit that as a teacher, I benefited massively from this particular insight. And in fact, my general position is this kind of academic insight is extremely useful because it helps us think about what we do and gives us some sort of purchase on what is otherwise a kind of undoable task. And so it's very useful, but at the same time, I also know that teachers have to bring something else to it to make it work. Okay? So they have to bring in additional knowledge and know-how to make something even like pigs and cow work. Why? Well, firstly, it's content-free. So you need to put this idea of pigs and cow into some sort of content area. And so how do you do that? Well, it's your professional knowledge and skill. So teachers are now in a position of having to activate this, if you like, research-based insight. But even with that, you might still have further questions. For example, how much contextual support is needed in relation to any one individual? Because no two people would need the same contextual support. What is for me easy, because I've done it before, because I went to school in some other place and I learned it. So I don't need you to support me with my context. But others who might not have experienced this piece of curriculum would need all the support they need. So how do you deal with that? So it's not some sort of, uniform mass in front of you. You are also talking about individual engagement on the part of the pupils. So even a powerful concept like this, pigs and cow distinction, teachers have to do something else to make it work. That's the first thing. And also, in relation to different bits of the content, how much support is necessary for a science lesson on the topic of, let's just say, germination of seeds, as opposed to the water cycle. Okay? So there's that. And then, for example, one piece of Cummins' advice is bilingualism is good, so use L1 where you can. Well, the point is the teacher has to find out how much L1 the pupils have, because it's a waste of time if you use L1 that they don't know, because they haven't been to school to learn that part of L1. So you're just doubling the, as it were, the learning burden, so to speak. So there are those issues. And beyond that, of course, pigs and cow is not a simple linguistic phenomenon. If you care to listen in any school classroom, listen when teachers talk. Their talk is not cow, not pure cow. People don't talk like that. Okay? It's a mixture, it's hybrid. And interspersed between classroom management, control, all the rest of it. It's a very complex linguistic process. And a couple of years ago, I was working on a research project with my colleague Brian Street at King's. And we talked to a teacher in a school in North London, and she said to us, Biggs and Cow, fantastic, gave me clarity, wonderful. But I never heard it. In the classroom, I don't know what it is when I hear this. I don't know where to find Biggs and Cow. And I think that sums it up. It is a wonderful concept, beautiful, powerful, but teachers have to make the concepts work. So there's something for us to do. Stephen Krashen, psycholinguist to boot, and so on. And, his work has been, again, publicly acknowledged, first time in 2006 by the PFES. And one aspect of his theory is that the trajectory of language development can be seen as comprising two, as it were, aspects. One is the acquired aspect, the other is the learned. The acquired is a system that is non-conscious and is very similar to first language development. In other words, young babies don't actually say, well, I'm going to have my first lesson in English. You just kind of engage with the parents and the dog and so on, And so it's non-conscious and it is rich in context, as Kenneth has told us, rich in context and is engaged in real-life functional interaction, okay? The learned system is the more artificial thing that is probably, perhaps we can say, in relation to something like learning a foreign language. So if I were to learn Russian, and I'm sure there are colleagues here who speak Russian, then for me, because I don't have any kind of natural exposure to Russian, I would have to go to a lesson and I'll be told all the vocabularies and I have to learn all the grammar rules and whatnot. And so that would be the learned system. And in Krashen's recommendation, he would argue that, well, the good thing about acquisition is that it's natural and it is unfolding and it's superior. Because he argues that if it's acquired, it's part of you. If it's learned, you might have to monitor it. In other words, to be conscious when you use the language. And that, in fact, is not probably the way that you should, as it were, encourage people to think about their language development. So the perspective is psycholinguistic, as well individual. And the developmental trajectory is loosely, I would say, I wouldn't be too tight on this one, loosely Chomskyan, in the sense that there is this unfolding capacity that is hardwired into humanity, and so the trigger of unfolding of the development is contact with the natural language community, parents, for example. But, as we saw from Kenneth's input, the actual exposure is sometimes impoverished, even in a very supportive school environment, even in, as it were, a context where the individual has loads of friends and who are mother tongue speakers of English. With all that taken into account, it would still be, given that the person is starting late, for example, late in life, and also maybe have other languages that they attend to in other aspects of their lives, and so on and so on. So the frequency and the volume of interaction might be somewhat reduced. In any case, it's not content specific. And if you take, if you like, this idea from natural acquisition, in a general sense, to say, well, it's actually a good thing for people to have lots of exposure and have meaningful use. I don't think any of us here in the room would object to it. We say, well, this is absolutely the case. Great, let's provide more of it. But is it the case that you don't then need to do anything else? If natural acquisition is all you need, then probably you don't need to do anything else. So what's the point? Well, the point is, school expectation in relation to language and English and French or whatever it is not just from the natural exposure of language. Academic English for mother tongue speakers as much as for EAL learners, it's not just that version of language that you speak at home, in the community, at play, go to a football game. It is actually the school register, the school language, and that is part of the teaching. And that is not part of the natural kind of repertoire. And so we need to think about it. And we need to slot this into, as it were, some sort of context of content. Does this natural exposure thing work in the same way in a science lesson as it is in PE? Probably not. Because you don't expose yourself to science concepts in the way that we talk about it in science lesson. In the kitchen at home, there are all kinds of differences. So there you are. Teachers bring to, if you like this, instinctively. They might not have formulated it in the way that I have, but they do know that you can't just leave it alone. If you do, then you've got no job anyway, passion or not.